Jessica Crow, and I'm the host of Change Leader Insights, which is the podcast you're listening to or watching right now. And it is a podcast that is all about leadership and change. And I am so excited because today I have Kristoffer Carter with me. And Kristoffer, I'm going to let you do your bio in a second, but we became connected on LinkedIn somehow. I'm pretty sure it's because we have so many similarities. His focus on leadership, we're both yogis, a lot of really cool parallels, but also he's the author of, about this book, I need you all to go out and get it as well, Permission to Glow, a spiritual guide to epic leadership, which spoke to my heart because of all of the things that I am connected to and teach on myself. Kristoffer, do you mind, I'm looking at you now, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself, who you are, and then how you got to where you are today as an author, a coach, all the different things? Tell us your whole origin story.
Oh, awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Jessica. It's awesome to be here with you. And yes, we do have a lot. We do geek out over many of the same things, which is always exciting. On paper, I'm an executive coach and founder of an organization called Epic Leadership, which trains and coaches the next generation of conscious leaders. On kind of off paper and under the hood, I, as you mentioned, am a yogi and I practice a lot of meditation. I've been a meditation teacher for about 12 years, and our website kind of got off the ground by helping thousands of people and leaders create a meditation habit. And we talked last week and I told you that I don't know that I chose this line of work. I think it kind of chose me because there was no
Yep.
major in college offered to put you on the path of becoming a conscious leadership coach. But I think my journey, and what you probably find with a lot of leaders on your show, is that I just had to surrender into my purpose over the period of many, many years. I had kind of that coaching mindset that, when I would sit down on an airplane, maybe 12 years ago, when I was a sales director in digital media,
Mhm.
I was flying all over the country selling advertising, and people would sit down next to me on the plane and tell me one of two things. They would tell me their deepest, dark fears, or they would tell me their big honking dreams, sometimes
Yeah.
both in the same conversation. And I was always wondering, what do I do with this information, And I think that there was an openness and a curiosity that I brought to those conversations, like a genuine fascination with what makes people tick and how to help them
Yes.
get where they want to go. And then through many years of training and lots of coaching conversations, I did in fact realize, like, oh, this is what I'm here to do professionally, which is help people do something with that information. So
Yeah.
I ended up going to training with accomplishment coaching, as well as just going into business for myself 8 years ago after I left corporate. But
Yeah.
all of those kind of hurdles you face going into business for yourself. I'm the head of a family of five. My
Yeah.
wife works with me in the coaching business, but we have 3 kids. And there's no real manual on how to go into entrepreneurship. So I had to apply all those things I was learning and coaching on in my own life. And that's what became the foundation of Permission to Glow, the 4 permissions
Oh,
in the
that's
book.
cool. That's
Yeah.
really cool, especially since I found from coaches that I speak with, it's easier to provide that coaching experience for others, but then to apply some of those, that process to yourself can be more challenging. But as I've kind of gone through the book and just talking to you, I've realized that you live and breathe. This is you. This is everything that you've, kind of worked on and worked towards, and it's manifested in this book. So I'm really happy to be having you on the show today to talk more about that. You
Sure.
mentioned, okay, so I'm gonna go through some questions because I came up with
Mhm.
them, and with Kristoffer, and I'm excited because I think this is going to help us really get into the depth of Permission to Glow. You talked a little bit about what motivated you to write Permission to Glow, but why are the insights more important kind of now than ever before in today's, high change, VUCA? Tell us
Yeah.
about why if I'm a leader of people, of
Yeah.
change, why do I need to pick up this and maybe think about the 4 permissions? And what are the 4 permissions, by the way?
Sure. So you mentioned maybe the most important starting point is the word VUCA. It's the acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Those forces are speeding up and compounding on us in the landscape of modern business and modern organizational leadership. You could look out your window and see these in any number of ways. I mean, they manifest as climate change, political division, fiscal cliffs every few
Mhm.
months and just all the uncertainty around the economy. So those changes, the bad news is those aren't going anywhere anytime
Mhm.
soon. The good news is we can do something with those. And that's where the four permissions come in.
Mhm.
So what I train a lot in organizations is that how we relate to change, it's not change itself that's kicking our butts a little bit. It's how we relate to change as
Yeah.
leaders and as organizations. And so when change shows up and slaps us on the face, we can respond by becoming one of these four characters. So see if these resonate with you or if you show up in these in any way. The first
Yeah.
one's called Speedy Rabbit. That's the need to just move faster than everyone else and maybe judge everyone for not keeping up. Just because stopping equals death, we just have to move, 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 move. That's called Speedy Rabbit. I'm guilty as charged of that. The second one is Game Face, where people ask us how we're doing and we just put on this facade and say, fine, fine.
Mhm.
And we just protect ourselves by masking our true emotions. That's called Game Face. The
Mhm.
third one is also a favorite of mine. Ask my teenagers. It's called the Phantom Pest. That is the micromanaging control freak. When we feel confronted with our own power, instead of doing the big, bold thing, we retreat into the small, minute details that we can control. So this is like the
Yeah.
leader that stays up all night worrying about PowerPoint fonts when they could be,
Right.
planning a merger, acquisition, something big.
Yeah.
And then finally, the dark star. The dark star is the person who refuses to accept any support. They act as if they do, but they have really removed themselves and created so many layers between receiving actual full support from other people. So
Yeah.
when one of those four critters shows up with us, we have the option of making the conscious choice, and there's a corresponding permission we can give ourselves for each of these four. So Speedy Rabbit, the cure is permission to chill. Uh,
Yeah.
for Game Face, it is permission to feel all the feels.
Yeah.
For the Phantom Pass, is permission to glow in the dark, which is where it starts to get fun and interesting. That's to
Yeah.
do the bold thing despite all the constant fear that we all have. And then finally, permission to glow in the light, which is to surrender into full selfless service. So the leaders that do the work of those earlier three permissions are more able to surrender to that fourth, which is all about the collective upliftment, collective, elevating others through service.
Yeah, and I was with that one in particular, what stood out to me was cooperation versus competition. So I think that
Yeah.
one in particular was, um, I was thinking about that as I was reading through your book. Well, then how do you, okay, so you mentioned those personality types that can show up. And then how do you see that affect, the organizations that you work with when you have those dynamics at play and people aren't giving themselves permission to chill or to
Mhm.
glow, et cetera?
Yeah, so a great example, we probably talked about this, was the show Ted Lasso. It's just
Oh
a
yeah.
great example of great writing,
Yep.
that you could see how these different ways we show up under stress can affect people around us. So
Hmm.
when leaders move too fast, we experience this as parents too when we're rushing our kids out the door. Do our children or do our peers feel very seen and heard when we are
Hmm.
just moving too fast and maybe judging them for not keeping up?
Hmm.
So Game Face, it's the I don't actually know what's going on under the hood, so I can make up
Hmm.
stories about your behavior, but they're probably wrong. They're just interpretations
Yeah.
versus the what's actually going on with you. And Ted Lasso, I think, did a great job. That show does a great job of uncovering that emotional intelligence
Mhm.
piece. Um,
Yeah.
the Phantom Pest, I think, it's self-explanatory when we're micromanaging. I have leaders that call this swooping and pooping, where they sit on the sidelines just enough to let people figure it out, and then they want to swoop in and control everything, and that just
Yeah.
it's crazy making
That
for
happens a
everybody.
lot, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's just a constant. And the dark star is, the captain going down with the ship and doesn't
Yeah.
really realize that they're the ones causing it because they're not deploying the power of their full team. So I think these are pretty generalized, but they're also
Mhm.
very, very common. And they happen with all of us. We just want to
Yeah.
train ourselves to make the conscious choice to lean into the more conscious permission.
Yeah, and be aware of it. And, you mentioned stress earlier. I mean, we can have work-related stress because of deadlines, but often stress is due to change. And to your earlier point about the way that things are changing always continuously, I think that being aware of how we show up, and that these are the ways in which we can show up, and giving ourselves permission depending on how we're showing up that day in these ways can really help us create space for the people that we're working with, that we're leading, that we're, that are our leaders, to move forward in a way that is more healthy and balanced and mindful. And that's really when you start to overcome some of those barriers and roadblocks that occur when change happens, that resistance. You're being aware of, well, who am I in this moment? Am I the speedy rabbit? Am I the dark star? Or how are, how are things happening with my team? What kind of conversations, if I'm a leader of a team and I'm noticing these personalities, or I'm noticing it in myself, um, what kind of questions can I ask myself or ask my team to help really understand, like, where are you at right now? And how can I help you? Like, how can you, with those permissions, obviously, what are some ideas there?
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to start with what are the unhelpful questions, because
Okay. Yeah.
old management style kind of came out of the agricultural age, the industrial age.
Yeah.
And so we ask questions like, what were you thinking? What are you doing? You know,
Right.
why
Why
did you
did
do
you do that?
these really judgy, harsh questions versus a coach, like I think the questions should come from the heart of coaching.
Yes, I totally
We
agree.
are exiting the command and control age in
Yes.
organizations, and we have entered the coaching, where we are
Mhm.
coaching age, which we are unlocking the potential of everyone. So the
Mhm.
more helpful questions are just open-ended and curious. What are
Mhm.
your options? What's on your mind? And what else? What's the real
Mhm.
challenge? My friend Michael Bunke Stanier wrote The Coaching Habit, excellent book of just simple questions to ask.
Yeah.
But we want to be on the same side of the table as the people that report to us, to understand how to see the world through their eyes,
Mhm.
and where they could be coming from and what their options are. So in unlocking the potential of others, I like to just give the guidance to ask questions that begin with the word what, that you don't know the answer to, because we
Yeah.
don't want to lead the witness and guide them to our way of thinking. We want to just start in the unknown with them, and what's on your mind, and what
Yeah.
else? Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. What's the real challenge? These are ways for us to get connected and present, and not overly control where we're leading our people. We still have to lead them, we still have to manage them, but they are not ours to control. And the more we try to do
Mhm.
that, it just compounds the stress that they're experiencing.
Right. And then that they're in that fight, flight, or freeze. And that's not a place where
It's not
executive
healthy.
functioning is high. It's
Yeah.
survival mode. And it
Yeah.
really impacts their ability to change, to see that other perspective, to want to do something differently,
Yeah.
and be aware of, their thoughts, patterns, behaviors, so they can actually
Do
change them.
something with it. Yeah.
With change, why is it so hard for most of us to change, like even a little bit? Why is this process so
Yeah.
scary?
I think it's like, I think change is, I think of it like, be careful what you wish for, because
Yeah.
I've never met a coaching client who didn't really in their heart want to change. But then when change shows up, it can be just so brutal. And then we just
Yeah.
start resisting it, like, no, too much, too soon.
Yeah.
So I think it's, our cultural conditioning. I think we have to put on a very brave face, especially as leaders, and say, I got this,
Mhm.
I got this. And the ones who are willing to be vulnerable and admit that they don't got this, and if we're lucky,
Mhm.
maybe we got this, then they have a much greater chance of success in this high change environment. So I think we just learn through conditioning and social posturing to protect ourselves and say that, change doesn't mess with me, or, it doesn't phase me. But the fact is, it affects all of us. If we're really honest about the state of change in our world, in our country, in our environment, it can be overwhelming and stressful and depressing and terrifying.
Yeah.
However, if we're also a little bit optimistic, we might, we might see that all those emotions are leading us someplace better in the long run,
Yeah.
that they're leading us to a place of, we have to collaborate, we have to innovate, we have to address these things. And I think that on a micro level, that's what happens inside a team every single day, that when we stop trying to take it on all ourselves and act perfect, other people can become part of our story, and we could unleash, like a bigger potential with all of us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As you were saying that too, it got me thinking how, as a leader, it is scary to be in that place of people are looking to you to have all of the answers. And so having
Yeah.
that vulnerability, I don't have all the answers. Maybe we have all the answers. That's a big piece of it. But do you think there's also space for with the team, not expecting your leaders to have all the answers? I think that that place of suffering, like they're in this
Yeah.
position, they should know what to do. And then if they're saying they don't, I think there's, how do we reconcile that piece?
Well, do you remember growing up, Jessica, that point where you realized that maybe you know as much, if not more, than one of your parents? It's like kind of terrifying. You're like,
I
oh
thought
my
that
God.
early on, but no.
Yeah, it's
Wasn't
like
true.
that moment where you realize, like, wow, maybe they don't have all the answers, the keys to the universe, and you're like,
Yeah.
that is like mind-blowing paradigm shift. It's like
Yeah.
that's maybe I'm the adult now. But it's similar. One of my favorite CEO clients I ever worked with, just a really incredible conscious leader, built this incredible award-winning culture at his company. He was the third of a four generation line of leadership. So this stuff was in his blood. He said,
Yeah.
he's like, do you want to know the seven most powerful words in business and in leadership? And I was like, well, Mark, who the hell wouldn't want to know the seven?
Right.
He's phrases like, I'm like, what are they? And it was, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Those are the seven most powerful words in leadership and in business. And I think it just implies a lot of vulnerability and curiosity.
Mhm.
And if we're honest with ourselves, our job is to uh, um, attract, onboard, develop, and retain people who are more talented than us, more
Yeah.
specialized, more
Yep.
talented than us. And the way that we keep them engaged is by admitting, like, we don't know. What are they like? We're there to facilitate higher level
Mhm.
problem solving. So,
Yeah.
so the less we do the old school Jack Welch thing, which is like, I know the way, blah, 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 blah. It's a very like privileged mansplainy approach to leadership that we're moving out of. And
Yeah.
when we're willing to do that and be vulnerable, everybody leans in, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it could be scary, but I would practice just the tiny bold move of that, which is just admitting, I don't have the answer.
You
What do
don't
you
know.
think? And
Yeah.
it'll let you off the hook too. It's a lot less stress on the leader for sure.
Absolutely. You've mentioned, okay, so admitting, I don't know. What do you think? I love that. I'm going to be using that. And then you've mentioned curiosity a couple of times in the context of conscious leadership. What role does compassion play in that space?
Yeah, I love this question. It's really everything. This is one of these things where it's easy to marginalize this as a soft skill, but
Right.
this is the really terrifying hard work that some leaders are willing to do and many more won't. So, like, I always
Right.
challenge the notion that things like compassion are a soft skill. But at the end of my book, I finish with the seven compassionate laws of
Hmm.
lasting change, because without self-compassion, if we approach it solely as a performance-based achiever mentality, that was
Hmm.
great. It was a great look in the 80s when we had like spandex track suits on, and it was all about if you believe it, you dream it, you can
Achieve
do
it.
it. That
Yeah. Right.
high achiever stuff. When you let go of that, and compassion is the thing that greases all the gears. So we stop riding ourselves or our people like a crappy little horse jockey, like more,
Hmm.
faster, better, and
Hmm.
start understanding them as a complex, deeply feeling human being.
Hmm.
When we tap into that person is capable of achieving so much more if
Hmm.
they are open to the radical notion of loving themselves while they do it. That
Hmm.
I want to accomplish for you, and I am a human being worthy of respect and love and care regardless of the outcome. That is a radical notion. But
Yeah.
again, the leaders that really get that, they have way higher levels of retention over the lifetime of that employee's career. I mean, they will stick with, imagine going the places that we have worked in the past that we loved, we were able to have self-compassion for ourselves while we were pushing really hard for a goal. Sometimes we got there,
Hmm.
sometimes we didn't, but if you have to maintain the compassion, it's just so key.
Yeah, it is hard though. That compassion piece to develop for
Oh,
the self. And then,
self-compassion
yeah,
is the hardest. I mean, I
yes,
think we're all on this continuum trying to we start with hopefully self-acceptance. You know, we can
yeah,
accept ourselves and then maybe move into self-respect if we're luckier, and
yeah,
then self-love. And from self-love, if you talk to the leaders that really have phenomenal careers that produce phenomenal results and returns for all their stakeholders, they have traveled that journey and ended up somewhere in self-love. And it's not this
yeah.
braggadocious, braggy Instagram version of it. It's like a
No,
very
yeah.
deeply felt and resonant, because as they respect and love themselves, they're better able to do that with everyone around them, and everyone around them feels that level of presence.
Yeah. And those are the type of people when they're talking about, a big transformational change or even a small one in an organization. You're like, I'm going to follow them
Yeah.
because of what they represent and they stand for and how they show up in this world. So, I think it's just a really an important call to, I'm gonna say call to action for uh, leaders today, regardless of, where we can all be leaders, whether or not we manage people, you know. So I think it's just a really important call out that if we haven't done that work or are committed to that self acceptance, going on that journey, we're going to potentially miss out on this opportunity to lead and inspire, um, versus, manage, command, and control. That could end up being our default because we haven't figured out how to move beyond that structure, which to your earlier point is starting to lose some steam, especially with our younger workers. That's not resonating with our future leaders. They want something different, which I think
If
we
you end up, if you find yourself working for somebody who only cares about your output and your
the
results,
results. Yeah,
you might as well be stamping out widgets in a factory. And there's nothing wrong with that job either, but just know what you're signing up for. But
yeah,
if you're trying to lead a mission driven business forward in the knowledge age or the information age, having compassion from your leaders, having compassion for your teammates, for yourself, it's such a prerequisite because of that volatile rate of change, that compassion is directly tied to resilience. We're going to need
hmm,
resilience if this change keeps hammering us. And
yeah.
so understanding that it's okay to make mistakes and that you will make mistakes. And as long as you're learning from them, everything's going to be better than fine.
Yeah, absolutely. With our conversation around conscious leadership and thinking about the journey of the leader, there's also a bit of and compassion. There's a bit of personal responsibility that we as the led also have. And I was thinking about this in the context of mindfulness and meditation practices, which I know you're well versed in, and how mindfulness, it sort of helps us move to that place of non-judgment and seeing things with more clarity, but also gives us a chance to take responsibility for our emotions versus blaming others.
Yeah.
And so, as you were describing that leadership piece, there's a piece here too with the people that are being asked or invited to do something differently. Do you have any perspectives on that and how it might tie to some of the work that you've already taught on or is included in the book?
For sure. So inside the book, there's a great visual depiction of the four permissions framework with the
Hmm,
four who I call the frenemies, the speedy rabbit, game face, and those are our
hmm.
survival mechanisms. But the difference between those two, the most important piece is the what I call the source fader on the turntable, or
Oh yeah.
the conscious choice. So your awareness will allow you to choose differently in the moment, and that's what meditation trains.
Hmm,
That's what mindfulness trains. So meditation to me is the best practice for this, but there's a lot of them. You could do alternate nostril breathing in yoga. You
hmm,
can do pranayama breathing, or all these Wim Hof breathing practices are really
hmm,
basically anything to get your own attention, that
hmm,
trains your attention. And what we're doing in meditation is bringing our awareness back. It runs away every 2 seconds, and we just bring it back. And in doing
hmm,
so, we're strengthening our meta attention. And
hmm.
as our meta attention strengthens, it gives us, to me, what I think is the most important muscle you can build as a leader. It's discernment. In
Mm,
the serenity prayer, that's the wisdom to know the difference, the things that you
right.
can change and cannot change. But if you rigidly cling to the things that you cannot change, it's like falling on water skis and holding onto the rope. It is the most brutal ride.
That's a great example.
Truly, I mean, it is like if you cling to the old ways of doing things, even that worked last quarter, you will have a bumpy ride. But that
Yeah.
discernment that we train in meditation allows us to just be a little bit more fluid, a little bit more gentle before we jump in to just try to solve the problem, to even
Mm-hmm.
address, is this even a problem? All of
Mm-hmm.
that starts with discernment. And probably the best quote that summarizes this is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. There's a
Mm-hmm.
really famous quote: between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that
Yeah.
space is our ability to choose our response. In our response is our growth and our freedom. And what we're trying to just do in meditation, I believe, is to just widen
Free
those gaps
space.
a little bit better, because they just keep getting all compressed and we start speeding up, and then it's just, we're in overwhelm or stress, and we just need to widen those gaps, and that's what meditation does for us.
Yeah. And how amazing would it be? And I interviewed a couple of other people who are teaching on mindfulness and meditation. If, organizations adopted this as a way of working and they incorporated this thinking
Yeah.
and these practices, it could change so much. Because everything you're saying is it's right on. I'm right there with you. So everybody who's listening and watching, go start meditating. I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of there's
Well,
more to it than that,
it
but
is. I mean,
it's worth
so
considering.
the validation I got this weekend, I finally got around to reading one of the biggest books of the last decade, Atomic Habits by James
Oh
Clear.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just it's an outstanding book for many reasons, but he touched on something early in the book that is really powerful in the type of coaching I practice, which
Yeah.
is, if you have leaders who are coachable, who are open to becoming somebody different, they can become somebody different, capable of achieving completely different results. But
Mm,
when we stay fixated on the outcome, the what's in it for me, just getting to the goal, it's a very linear, gradual, incremental, one step forward, three steps back, three steps sideways, because all the change. But when we're working with leaders who are doing just the simple awareness practices, this creating a 15-minute a day mindfulness or
right.
meditation practice, that discernment muscle changes everything, because their being starts deepening. They
Hmm.
become more introspective, reflective, compassionate, patient, these
Hmm.
radical concepts. And in doing so, they attract better talent, they retain better talent, and they're able to navigate eventually towards their vision,
Yeah.
because they're able to course correct. And so I think it's just becoming more and more essential as the world continues to get a little crazier.
Yeah, I that makes a lot of sense. I have another question for you, sort of going in a slightly different direction.
Yeah.
It's still within the same vein, but you write about or you talk about permission to suck. So how does that fit within the framework, and how can organizations embrace that mindset?
Yeah, yeah. It's so hard to get hired as a coach when you give people permission to suck. No, it's permission to suck really just ties in that self-compassion piece, that when we're starting out, I literally just wrote about this today, that there's the expectations we have about how growth is going to occur, that we're trying to achieve results in a certain amount of time. We expect it to be this like even Steven
Right.
steady as she goes, and it's nothing like that. At first, we have to cross what I call as the desert, which is the desert is what's called conscious incompetence. And
Yeah.
this is the awareness that we don't know what we're doing. And so if you want to become a better leader, a better manager, you're going to be acutely aware of all your gaps first. And
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
most people give up. That's where they throw a lot of tantrums, or if you're a man, a mantrum, because they can't handle that they're not meeting their own expectations. So I just call that the desert. And
Yeah.
once they're willing to cross that desert and they're patient, we're laying a lot of foundations of awareness, and that's that root system, like in bamboo, that'll
Mhm.
form for 2 to 4 years in some cases, and then explode 96, hundreds of feet
Mhm.
in a few days. That is the breakthrough results in coaching that comes from laying that foundation of awareness. So it's like, I jokingly called it permission to suck, but just allowing it to be messy at first. Adopt the mantra, bless this mess, because
Yeah.
if you're committed to growth, don't be committed to that being a clean, linear, beautiful, elegant process. I've
Yeah.
not seen it happen that way.
Well, that's a really important message to apply, not only from the individual coaching perspective, but also the organizational change
Yeah.
perspective. as leaders of people and teams, we have to give them permission to suck and realize that the second we launch a change or we go live, that it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be pretty painful or messy or
Right.
whatever it is. And that the real improvements, the adoption, the benefits happen after you get through that desert. And then, like the bamboo, you're kind of building that foundation of awareness. So when that switch hits or flips, you've
Yeah.
got people will be able and empowered to do the things that they need to be able to do. But that
Yeah.
permission to suck doesn't exist in a lot of organizations. Like expectation is we're
Yeah.
live, like you do your job really well, and you're not there yet. So
Yeah. I think it's if they're it's okay for organizations to have high standards. I think that's good for everyone. We want to keep improving and we want people to perform well. There's nothing wrong with that expectation. It's that when we get too rigid around it, and
mhm.
I think the ask in return is I will give you permission to fail, permission to, be less than perfect. Um, you know, let's be honest. Most of us want to hire A players and we consider ourselves A players. So the idea of
Mhm.
sucking at anything is like really outlandish.
Mhm.
And if the ask in return is to just always be learning and applying what
Yes.
we're learning, you want people to fail often, fail forward, all that
Go
stuff. So
forward.
it's the
Yeah.
micro adjustments you make, and you don't get that if you're just rigid and putting on a face of like, I'm crushing it all the time. Anytime a C-level leader or a founder gives me the I'm crushing it vibe for too long as their coach, I just have to jump in and dismantle that facade because crushing
Like,
it might work on Wall Street in certain, forward-looking statements in the earnings catalog, whatever. But in a coaching conversation, it's like cut the crap and be real. This
yeah.
isn't easy,
Yeah. Yeah. Like be honest about it. And
Yeah.
I agree though. I mean, having the way you said it, fail forward, fail fast, fail forward. I think that's the right way to think about it in the context of in the business setting. Yes. And how do you move through that desert fairly quickly?
Yeah.
This has been, I have really loved talking to you. You have a
Likewise.
wealth of wisdom, and you're just a cool human being as well. So thank you for sharing your insights and perspectives with me and the Change Leader Insights community. Where can people find you if they want to find your book, if they're interested in getting coaching because they themselves, their team, their organization, they want to change, they're preparing to experience change? How can they get in touch with you?
All of our stuff. Well, first of all, thank you for having me,
Yes.
Jessica. You're awesome. And I love that you're committed to doing this work. It's so important for people. Um, all of my stuff can be found at epicleadership.org.
Okay.
And we just launched a new Substack newsletter called Tiny Bold Moves, which is a free newsletter that I'm really excited about. But
Very cool.
everyone can find the book and everything related to my work through Epic Leadership.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to get those links and then include them in the promotion. But thank you so much again for being here. Thank you for listening and watching for those of you that are tuning in. And yeah, Kristoffer, have a great rest of your day and keep doing the great work that you're doing.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Jessica. Thanks again.
Thanks.